Good afternoon, Mark.
Hi, Jason. Great to see you.
So I have Marc Z with Legal Staffing with me today. He's the president of Marc Z Legal. Mark, let me kind of introduce you a little bit. You're a legal recruiter, but much more than that. You were a trained litigator. You actually were in litigation for some time, and also was in-house for a while.
Right, Jason. My firm, we did national litigation. I started in Washington. I trained in law school in trial advocacy. Give a talk today, and then I went on to assist our firm in some national cases as well as local cases, and ultimately was recruited for an in-house role, and then started the legal search, handling attorneys at all levels as well as staffing over 30 years ago.
So we're definitely going to get more into that in a little bit. But I wanted to kind of ask you about, where have cases where people are charged with white-collar crime or fraud or embezzlement, what type of impacts can that have on their background checks? To say, yeah, well, let me split this up because it's a big question I know I'm asking you. But one, let's just talk about them as an employee, not as an owner or an investor or maybe a CEO, but just them as an employee. What type of effects does just being charged and having something on that record affect them as employees?
It's a huge impact on their employment. First of all, I can't tell you how many times when we've done background checks, or client law firms or corporations have done background checks, it's led to offers being withdrawn.
Oh, wow.
Also, we've been involved in searches when we've met people, and it's come up on our own checks where we've had to say they won't allow it for this job, and even for us, because of our liability insurance, we haven't been able to put them forward, even though they had a great background for staffing positions.
Oh, wow.
So
Yep.
when you're talking about background checks, even coming up with felonies from years ago,
Right.
it's huge, and a lot of companies and firms won't look at the big picture or think outside the box in terms of the circumstances.
Right, and just to break up that a little bit more, without telling us all your secrets, obviously, but what type of things come up? Like, say if a person's charged, but they were never convicted of the crime, would those things show up on a background check that you run or a company runs regarding them?
Yes, and you know what's interesting is you would think, like for example, Massachusetts eventually said we're going with query checks to 7 years out and we're done.
Yes.
But there are some companies out there like HireRight or ADP. They can do background checks nationally, and they can come up with some information like somebody got a DUI, or somebody has a credit check. They'll do credit checks, and somebody will have a credit issue. For example, you're looking at a controller or a CFO who went through a personal bankruptcy. That will come up, and even though it's not a crime, companies or law firms will say if they're handling our money,
Right.
maybe they might not be the best person for us because they went through a personal bankruptcy, or they've had a case where it comes up with a DUI, and even though again they didn't commit any crime, their background check comes to that, or even arrests come up that were dismissed. We had somebody, for example, that was on a project, and their background check cleared. Later on, it was found out that they did, and so a client said, "We're not interested in them."
Oh,
Well, if everybody dug deeper in terms of the case, they would have found they were arrested, but they were part of a wedding party in terms of something that went wrong when somebody was defending somebody at a wedding, and there was an arrest, and immediately it went before a judge and it got dismissed. Well, that showed up. And so the person lost out on an assignment, even though it was dismissed, even though it was a very innocent situation. The other thing, Jason, to go one more step further, not even on background checks, are a lot of companies and organizations Google candidates, and
Right.
they'll find something that won't come out on an official background check, but they've Googled them and they've already said, well, if this information's come forward, we're not interested.
So there's two more questions that immediately brings to my mind. One, does the candidate themselves see the results of their background check? What if the background check is not correct? Because sometimes court records are confusing. Sometimes people have common names. Some people, I mean, I've expunged several records that a brother was using someone's name or someone was using someone's social security number. What happens in those situations? Does the candidate know what ends up showing up on the background check, and are they able to correct things that may not be correct?
So the answer is it depends. It depends on the organization. So we've had the typical attorney answer, right? So we've had situations with the more sophisticated law firms and companies, and what they've done is they've given the candidate the opportunity to address that.
Got it.
So we've had situations, you're totally right. It's been the wrong name. We had somebody's background came up one time and they had the same name as a rapist. That literally same name, same middle name that had to be corrected. We have had other times where the attorney didn't update the bar on some information, or some information that was requested was never recorded. So by giving the person the chance to address that, we've been able to correct that and get by that. Other times, with some smaller organizations, they're like, this is the information we have, we just don't want to touch it.
Oh, wow. So I guess then it leads to my next question. Once a person realizes that this is the issue, that's the reason why they didn't get their job, what are the abilities of these outside companies or a query check to show a case or a charge that may have been sealed or versus a case or a charge that might have been expunged?
So are you asking in terms of getting information?
Yeah,
from
so if
companies?
you run someone's record and it's been sealed, let's start with that. Does it show up that it's been sealed, or does it show that it doesn't have a record?
It's interesting. If it's sealed, they may not be able to get into it if it's sealed. If it's something that happened 10 years ago, that would come up on certain background checks, because companies say, we want to know if they've ever been convicted. So they'll go back more than 7 years and this information will come up. And again, a lot of companies or law firms will say, look, that happened 10 years ago, we'll pass on it, but others will make a decision based on that, rightly or wrongly.
Right.
And that's why a lot of states just go the 7 years, but other companies will say, look, we're not prevented, you're going to pay for it, we'll give you any information you want to know. And that's depending on the organization. So if it's sealed, it usually can't be get into, but they can come back to the company and say, we see something that's sealed.
Right.
Usually that's not probed if it's sealed.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, that's generally what we tell people, that if they have access, they have good access, a motion to seal essentially is a door. You can't look behind the door, but you see that the door is there. And a motion to expunge,
Correct.
which is much more limited in Massachusetts, is an eraser. But I'm having a lot of trouble, and I think all of us are having a lot of trouble to actually expunge particular things off people's record, even if it's a long time ago. You have to prove essentially the court is defrauded, which is very difficult. They have tried to expand that a little bit, but we're still kind of stuck. I like to switch gears a little bit. So we've talked about the employees, but this can also affect owners. I mean, when owners are trying to get deals or get their businesses sold, they could also affect them, or a managing partner, for example, who they're not associate, they're not kind of what they would consider more of a low-level employee. It can still also affect people later on, even if they own a business.
Correct. I mean, getting loans to start a business, the banks particularly they'll do intensive, and financial companies will do intensive background checks.
Right.
And if they see, for example, you've defrauded or you embezzled or you did something even when you were younger, that could affect whether or not they will give you a loan and whether or not you'll even be able to go into business. And that's a problem. And that's why a lot of states, and Massachusetts is more liberal in saying, and there've been a lot of advocacy on these issues. So that's why, again, a background check will only go back in Massachusetts. If you want to be a business in Massachusetts, they'll only go back 7 years. Right. So that's helped a lot of, for example, convicts who have done their time and they've been solid citizens, and then they're able to go get loans or be employed. Right. And you've got a lot of executives who maybe did some things rightly or wrongly to help their families. I mean, it's wrong, obviously, but they did some things years ago that it comes back to haunt them. And that's why these laws have now been implemented. But You're totally right. With lawyers going before certain state bars, certain convictions, even if it was younger, we had an issue where there was somebody that was in a gang years ago, and they really they brought themselves up. They ended up going to law school, and they've been a solid citizen. In fact, they were looking to become part on the other side of a state institution. Correct. And unfortunately, that issue followed them, and it delayed them being admitted to the bar, even though they passed the bar exam. So we all get it that lawyers have to police their own, but sometimes, again, there's a big reason why that happened. And should this person's career be judged by that incident that happened years ago? So a lot of the bars are examining, and they're giving the person who's the young attorney or the older attorney a chance to explain themselves. But again, that could become a pardon the pun, a bar to them being admitted to practice.
I really appreciate the information. Now, Mark, we're going to talk a little bit about you. I'm almost a little hesitant to call you a legal recruiter. From everyone that I've sent you to work with, you're really more of a career crafter, right? Like that's why we gotta remarket you, because not only do you really just give people a job, where people think, okay, legal recruiter is gonna give someone a job, but you really think about like a holistic approach, and you're really more of like a career guidance person, in my opinion. You're more of an artist than just a person doing a job, because you have this unique approach where you have all this experience of yourself being an attorney. And people should know that being a legal recruiter, you don't need to have this experience. But what it does is it also completely doesn't give you any context about what job that is, how that will affect a person's future, how that's going to help or hurt their careers, which you have that expertise. So we should call you like a legal career guidance coach, whatever it may be. But when should people contact you? Like, when is a good time for them to engage into your services? And what part of their career would it be best for them to start having a conversation with you?
Well, thank you, Jason. I appreciate it. First of all, frankly, I look at myself as an attorney first, because I'm honored to be a member of the bar, and I'm honored to work with top attorneys at all stages. But, I've started talking to people even before they graduate law school, just to get to know them and build relationships. And over the years, different situations have happened. For example, with female attorneys who have eventually gotten to different stages of their career, particularly, although obviously we're in a world now that husbands help with the care of kids, but usually it's the mother. And so some of the particularly female attorneys have to take a step back, and I work with them in different areas. All the situations we work with are not cookie cutter. Today, the law, you have all different types of opportunities, and opportunities are different. So at every stage, whether it's they're beginning their career, they're in the middle part of their career, the end of their career, we've placed attorneys that are in their 70s and beyond. And we place people that are literally one year out. But even if they're beginning their career, during law school, we can provide not only guidance and building relationships, but we can give them contract work, temporary, through our staffing division, so they can build their skills and take those skills build them toward the next step of their career. So whether it's a full-time placement, whether it's a staffing assistance in any step of somebody's career, we're always happy to talk to them, to coach them at no charge, and really give them a sense of what would be the right fit. We take the long-term view with their careers. Sometimes people were saying, well, I want this particular situation. I want to move. I'm anxious to move. And we'll say, that's fine. We'll give you our advice, and you're the ultimate person that makes that decision.
Right. I really appreciate you coming on today. I'm hoping you can come back again in the future. Obviously, we don't have enough time today, but I would love for you to give your best tips and advice next time, just in terms of, say, if people had a criminal issue in the past, how to best move forward, right? Ultimately, that's what we want them to do. They pay their debts to society. We want them to move forward. But there's not a lot of guidance in that area, so we would love for you to come back and give us some of your advice in that area.
Well, I would be honored, Jason. It's been a lot of fun talking to you as always. And any assistance or any advice that I could give that could be helpful would be my pleasure.
Thank you again, Mark.
Thanks, Jason.